Hi guys, it's me again. For this week, I'll be discussing about the taxonomies of educational objectives. Let us learn kung bakit mahalaga siya sa pag-consider natin sa paggawa ng ating mga exams or even sa mga quizzes natin, lalo na sa ating mga lesson plans. Okay? And let us learn yung paggawa ng different learning objectives to form or to have a quality education for our students. And let's start with the meaning, kung ano ba talaga yung educational objectives. Pag sinabi natin educational objectives, it actually describes the goals towards which the education process is directed, kung saan papunta yung education natin, the learning that is to result from instruction. So, yung mga educational objectives, yun yung pinaka-result na gusto nating mangyari para sa mga estudyante natin sa instruction na gagawin. And when drawn up by an education authority or professional organizations, objectives are usually called standards. Kahit naman sino, 'di ba? Kung meron tayong gustong mangyari, we have our own standards. So, ano ba talaga yung dapat na expected natin na outcome or mangyari? And taxonomies are classification systems na based dun sa organizational scheme. In this instance, as a set of carefully defined terms organized from simple to complex and from concrete to abstract, provide a framework of categories into which one may classify educational goals. Such schemes can, no, gaano kahalaga yung mga objectives na to or yung mga standards na to para may quality talaga yung ginagawa na lesson plan or syllabus na ginagawa natin. First, guys, is provide a common language about educational goals that can bridge subject matter and grade levels. Kasi dapat naman talaga, may pagkaiba-iba talaga. Pag sa subject matter, di ba, iba-iba talaga yung objectives na meron doon, lalo na sa mga topics. Tapos yung mga grade levels, iba-iba din sila ng level ng thinking, lalo na sa pag-cognitive, di ba? Di ba, sa pinag-aralan natin sa past discussions that once we provide talaga assessment or sa lesson sa mga bata, we have to assess them kung ready na ba sila na matutunan yung bagay na yon. Kaya dito din sa educational objectives na to, pag nagbibigay tayo or pag nagsusulat tayo ng pwedeng mangyari sa instruction natin or kung ano may expected nating mangyari at the end of the lesson, dapat kino-consider yung grade level din. Okay? And serve as a touchstone for specifying the meaning of broad educational goals for the classroom. Kung napapansin nyo, yung mga national objectives talaga, sobrang broad niya. But once it's on a specific subject talaga, sa pagsusulat ng educational objective, pag sa, halimbawa, sa subject natin, dapat nag-specify tayo ng mga goals natin para sa classroom, para sa inyo na mga estudyante. And help to determine the congruence of goals, classroom activities, and assessments. Pag gagawa na kayo ng lesson plan talaga, ang pinakaunang gagawin nyo talaga is educational objectives. And this is a great way talaga or pinaka-secret para tumaas yung para mas maganda yung presentation nyo or mas effective talaga yung educational objectives mo ay connected dapat lahat sa lesson mo, sa discussion mo, hanggang sa quizzes mo or sa mga exams mo. Yun yung kagandahan ng educational objectives. So it will serve as a North Star or pinaka-guide natin para maganda yung inuturo natin. And it also provide a panorama of the range of possible educational goals. Minsan kasi sa sobrang lawak ng educational goals sa school, mas hindi siya measurable or imposible siya, di ba? Kaya pag educational objectives talaga na meron ang isang classroom, mas mapapadali or mas nagiging measurable yung expected na outcome or standard natin. Along these same lines is the taxonomies used to assure that objectives, instructional activities, and assessments are congruent or aligned with one another, even when instruction emphasizes objectives in the more complex categories, the difficulty of constructing test items to measure such as achievement often results in tests that emphasize the knowledge measurement instead. Alignment analysis highlights this inconsistency. Ito talaga, para sa akin as educators, you will be the most effective dun sa instructional materials mo or the way ka nagturo sa mga estudyante pag lahat ng pinapagawa mo, from the moment yung motivation mo hanggang sa exams mo, ay naka-align dun sa educational objectives mo. Kasi, yun talaga ang pinaka-standard eh. Mas maganda na yung goal mo ay na-reach mo or na-attain mo as educator. Then, the taxonomy has commonly been used in developing a test blueprint or pinakaplano talaga, providing the details for guiding item development to assure adequate and appropriate curriculum coverage. Some standardized tests show how their test items are distributed across taxonomy categories. Later on, pag-aaralan natin yung mga taxonomy na to, kung saan kinoconsider natin yung lower tsaka higher thinking skills ng mga estudyante natin. Maganda talaga na may blueprint or may plan ka para makukuha mo yung appropriate curriculum coverage para alam mo kung saan ka ba talaga mag-focus or kung anong important part dun sa topic na kailangan mo na i-elaborate sa mga estudyante mo. And that's the reason na aside from having these objectives talaga, ay magkaroon tayo dapat ng assessment for our students to check if they are prepared for this topic or do you think na achievable ba to na objectives na ginagawa mo. Okay? And then, here's the example guys kung bakit mahalagang pag-aralan natin yung taxonomy na to or educational objectives na to. Bakit natin sila i-consider? Para naman, you have your own feelings na or para ma-realize mo, ay ganun pala kahalaga talaga yung i-consider yung pag-aaral ng educational objectives na to or yung taxonomy of objectives na to na ginawa ni Blooms. Okay? Ito yung ginagawa namin once we provide exam. We call it as TOS or Table of Specifications. Para saan tong TOS na to? Table of Specifications kasi guys, this is para sa sa assessment mo. Kasi ang educational objectives talagang connected siya from the top sa topic mo, sa lesson mo hanggang sa assessment or sa exam mo. This is just an example. Pag gagawa ka ng exam, to make sure na may standard ka talaga, this is how you do it. For example, dito may kasama yung topic, yung total hours na tinuro mo yung subject na yan. Then, meron ding items na dapat i-consider mo. We have the R, yung R which is remembering. Halimbawa, sa test 2, questions mo ng 16 to 23 ay more on remembering lang. So, it's just lower order thinking skills. So, konti lang dapat yung ilalagay mo doon. Halimbawa, that's 40% of total items dito sa lower order. Understanding, tsaka applying. Pero pagdating mo sa higher order thinking, yun yung kasi ang pinakamahalaga, yung HATS eh. Alam mo yun, machi-check mo talaga kung maintindihan ng bata. It's not just merely memorizing or rote memory, yung tipong tandaan lang ng bata yung sagot. Ang higher order thinking skills, ang kasama talaga dyan, is yung sa analyzing, if they were able to analyze that situation or isang story, tapos i-evaluate nila yung ginawa, may yung mga nakikritik, tapos creating. They have to create something. Kaya pinakamataas siya, that's 60%. So there's a percentage in each type of objectives na gusto mong mangyari para sa exam mo. And now, let's check. Pag gagawa kayo, alamin natin kung ano yung ways for you to create it on your own. Kasi someday, gagawa din kayo niyan. And lalo na sa mga exams na parating man, you will learn to, maintindihan din nyo bakit kailangan ganon. Hindi sa lahat ng pagkakataon na ang exams ay more on multiple choice, dapat meron din siyang essay or something that you students or our students should create or analyze. Okay? And then, pag sinabi kasi nating objectives, halimbawa, for For this objective, we'll talk about the taxonomy of educational objectives sa cognitive domain. So, anong meron dito sa cognitive domain na to? Pag sinabi natin cognitive domain, it is the idea of creating a taxonomy of educational objectives was conceived by Benjamin Bloom talaga noong 1950. Ito guys, laking utang natin sa educators sa mga kay Benjamin Bloom kasi siya talaga yung nag-design ng Taxonomy of Educational Objectives. He is the Assistant Director of the University of Chicago's Board of Examinations. Kasi para sa kanila, mas maganda pag nagpo-provide talaga ng examinations ay meron silang standard para ma-check talaga kung valid yung exam na ginawa nila. Tapos si Bloom kasi, so to reduce the extensive labor of test development by exchanging test items among universities para makita talaga na may standard, di ba? Hindi lang sa specific school. You have to compare and contrast din so dun sa ibang schools na yon or universities. And he believed this could be facilitated by developing a carefully defined framework into which items measuring the same objective should be classified. Tapos yung examiners and testing specialists from across country were assembled into a working group that met periodically over a number of years. Kasi it should be periodically kasi minsan hindi na talaga siya pwede sa next na generations, 'di ba? May changes din talaga na pwedeng mangyari. Kaya mas maganda na updated din yung standard. And the result was a framework with 6 major categories and many subcategories for the most common objectives of classroom instruction. Those dealing with the cognitive domain to facilitate test development. The framework provided extensive examples of test items, largely multiple choice for each major category. Now, let's check dito sa iba. Halimbawa, dito sa knowledge dimension muna tayo. Anong meron dito sa knowledge dimension? Pag sinabi nating knowledge, it's more on cognitive or sa utak yon. It's the knowledge category of the original cognitive taxonomy, included both a content aspect and the action aspect for remembering. And these were separated in the revision so that the content aspects, the nouns, became its own dimensions with 4 categories. Ito guys, I remember lumabas din to siya sa LET. So I hope you'll be familiar with this type of knowledge or yung categories ng knowledge. Una is we have the factual knowledge, pangalawa yung conceptual knowledge, third procedural knowledge, and lastly yung metacognitive knowledge. Now, ano yung pagkakaiba ng mga categories na to? Pag sinabi nating factual knowledge, ito yung mga basic elements na dapat alam ng mga students natin or solve problem in it. Ang example ng factual knowledge ay mga knowledge of terminology. Alam ba nila yung term na yan? Familiar ba sila? Alam mo yun, it's more on memory talaga, memorizing or remembering lang. And then, knowledge of specific details and elements, yung mga detalye or facts, dapat alam nila. So, pag mga ganon, it's just on factual knowledge. Next naman na category is conceptual type of knowledge. Pag sinabi nating conceptual naman, ito yung mga interrelationship among the basic elements within a larger structure that enable them to function together. So, konsepto yung pinag-aaralan or kino-consider mo yung mga relationship ng isang concept, 'di ba? Kaya nga sabi nila there's this something na isang genius or one of the scholars said sa research talaga nila, if you want to mas maalala mo talaga yung isang bagay or best talaga way for you to have a greater score, perfect sa exam is have this conceptual knowledge. Alam mo yung connection or interrelationship ng mga pinag-aaralan mo. It should be concept. Alam mo yun? Buo siya. Part lang siya ng kabuuan. And next, halimbawa dito sa conceptual knowledge guys, yung mga classifications and categories, ika-classify nila yung process na to or yung idea na to. can you classify it as a fact or an, alam mo yun, mas malalim siya sa factual kasi yung factual, memorize mo lang or alam mo lang. Pero dito sa conceptual, dapat i-consider mo yung categories, generalization, alam mo yung kabuuan talaga siya. Knowledge of theories, models, and structures. Tapos, dito sa procedural knowledge, mas malalim siya. Kasi concept, di ba, it's just a mind lang. Pero sa procedural knowledge, there's a certain procedure wherein you have to know how to do something, like procedure ba to playing piano, kasi still the mind pa rin siya, but it's procedure kasi may steps ka na dapat sundin, including methods of inquiry and criteria for using skills, mga techniques, and methods. Yun yung procedural. Ibang example nito yung mga skills and algorithms, techniques, and methods, use appropriate procedures, kung paano ang pagluto ng cake, or alam mo yun, that's procedure knowledge. Most of the time dito sa procedural knowledge, na-apply siya sa mga HRM or yung mga courses na more on sa skills yung dine-develop. And then, dito talaga sa conceptual knowledge, it is really good for us educators, lalo pag sa LEP in the future, dapat alam nyo talaga yung konsepto ng kabuuan, like mga theories and models, kasi there are things, di ba, even mga practices. Saan ba sila nagmula? Nagmula sila sa theory ni Freud, or kung sino man yung educator na yun, sikat dati na philosopher, di ba? Kaya, if you remember dun sa subject natin na sa curriculum, dapat alam talaga natin kung ano theory. That's actually a conceptual knowledge of learning. Di lang kayo basta-bastang nag-memorize. Dapat alam niyo yung connection nyo. Kaya, di ba, you were asked kung ano ba talaga kayo in the future as a teacher. Kung anong theory or what type of foundation ang pwede mong gamitin. And then, lastly, dito sa metacognitive knowledge naman, knowledge of cognition in general, as well as awareness and the knowledge of one's own cognition. Ito talaga, pag metacognitive, tandaan natin, it's thinking about thinking. Bakit mo iniisip yan? Or bakit alam ko to? Bakit kaya dapat alam ko tong bagay na to? Or anong connection niya? What is it for me? Example nito is strategic knowledge. Dapat alam mo yung strategy mo para mas maalala mo yung isang bagay, di ba? At for you to, hindi lang siya basta-basta nalilimutan, na-apply mo din siya in the near future. And yun naman guys, it's more on cognitive. Yun yung before talaga na educational objectives. And second is affective domain. Kung yun naman brain, ito naman more on the heart, so feelings natin. In addition to devising the cognitive taxonomy, the Bloom's group later grappled with the taxonomy of the affective domain, objectives concerned with interest. Ito yung kasing isa more on facts, diba? Procedures. Ito pag affective naman, it's more on sa interest ng bata, sa attitudes, adjustments, appreciations, and values. Dapat kasali talaga to pag gagawa tayo ng lesson, diba? Hindi naman pwedeng memorizing lang of facts. There are appreciations, may mga values din dapat tayo na tinuturo or sinasama natin sa mga activities para sa mga estudyante. And like the cognitive taxonomy, it is assumed that learning at the lower category was prerequisite to the attainment of the next higher one. So here is the overview of the categories. Malalaman natin yan sa mga examples later on, yung pinaka-current na talaga na educational objectives ni Bloom's taxonomy, okay? Kasi yun naman yung dapat talaga nating i-master. We have here guys kay Bloom's revised taxonomy. Tatlo na siya. We have the cognitive, affective, and psychomotor, which is more on actions. We have the brain, the heart, tapos psychomotor, yung body. Yung Bloom's revised taxonomy, start tayo sa cognitive guys. The same thing lang. It's more on sa knowledge then. Lauren Anderson, a former student of Bloom, revisited the cognitive domain in the learning taxonomy in the mid-90s and made some changes. So, yung estudyante na talaga niya yung nag-made ng changes na to, with perhaps the two most prominent ones being, ito yung mga main na changes. First, changing the names in the 6 categories from noun to verb forms, naging verb. Di ba una kasi ano lang siya it's more knowledge or noun talaga siya. But this time, it's ginawa niyang verb. And then, another is slightly rearranging them. That's according to Anderson Krathwohl. And this new taxonomy reflects a more active form of thinking and is perhaps more accurate, lalo na sa century or sa mga 21st century learners ngayon. Mas maganda naman talaga if it's in a verb form with ing kaysa dun sa noun lang, which is knowledge or whatsoever. So, dito, ito yung mga main na ano. Kasi sabi ko kanina, kaya nga 'di ba si Bloom talaga ay pumupunta sa iba't ibang school to make changes at it should be updated periodically kasi hindi naman ibig sabihin no, na forever na or there's no room for changes at all. So maganda yung ginawa ng estudyante niya for this. Let's start with dito sa cognitive remembering. So nasa mababa lang siya. Yung kanina 'di ba, it's just on lower type of thinking skills lang. But it doesn't mean naman na hindi siya mahalaga. So sabi ko kanina, kailangan din natin tong mga lower thinking skills na to bago tayo pumunta sa higher order thinking skills. Kasi paano ka naman maintindihan yung mahihirap, 'di ba? Even simple things or simpleng facts din natin ma-master. So dito dapat tandaan din natin na mahalaga siya na mag-start tayo sa lower thinking. Okay? Pag sinabing remembering, ito yung we are just recalling previous learned information. Tinatandaan mo lang. Another example is understanding, comprehending the meaning, and translation, interpolation, and interpretation of instruction and problems. And you are stating then a problem in your own word. Dito muna tayo mag-focus pala guys sa remembering. 'Di ba? It's just recalling. Ang example ng recalling na to na pwede nating ipagawa sa estudyante or activities na i-include, you let them recite a policy. Memorize sila ng preamble ba dyan ng Code of Ethics for Teachers? Or it could be quotes prices from memory to customer and know the safety rules. 'Di ba? More on memorizing lang siya. Or inaalala mo lang yung mga facts na nangyari. So, yung keywords, guys, na pwede nyong gamitin to pwede nyong gamitin sa paggawa ng exam or paggawa ng table of specification, malaman kung lower lang. We have defines, describes, identifies, knows, labels, lists, matches, names, outlines, recalls, recognizes, reproduces, select state. So, mababa lang talaga siya. Alam mo yun, remembering lang talaga siya. Inaalala mo lang yung alam mo. And for this type of category kasi, sa remembering na to, dapat, dito kasi yung mga keywords, guys, you have to be familiar with it. Kasi gagawa kayo ng sarili nyong objectives sa susunod mga activities natin. And dapat alam nyo, ma-identify nyo, halimbawa yung objectives na binigay ko, alamin nyo, is it remembering, is it understanding, or applying? Dapat identify natin. Basta pag remembering is more on facts, mag-aalala lang, simple lang yung gagawin ng bata. Pag understanding naman, next category, it's comprehending the meaning, translation, interpolation, interpretation of instructions, and problems. Tapos, they have to state a problem in their own words. Pwede mong ipagawa sa bata na understanding type of activity or nasa understanding na category. Rewrites the principles of test writing, explain in one word the steps for performing a complex task, and translate an equation into computer spreadsheets. Kung napapansin mo, kasi di naman nagagawa ng bata niyan kung hindi nila naintindihan talaga. In that way, you have to check if it's not just remembering. Di ba? Pag remembering, ang dali-dali yan. Pag understanding, it's more on deeper, nas malalim na siya. Kasi you have to ask them kung ano yung pagkaintindi nila dun sa bagay na yun or sa tinuro sa lesson. Ang example na keywords that you can use, pag gumawa kayo ng question, comprehend, convert, defend, distinguish, estimates, explains, extends, generalizes, gives an example, infers, mag-interpret, paraphrases, mag-predict ka, rewrite, summarize, translate, That's all on the stage of understanding. Okay? And lastly, sa applying naman, use a concept in new situation. Gagamitin mo sa, there's an application of knowledge, prompted use of an abstraction, applies what was learned in the classroom into novel situation in the workplace. Halimbawa dito na pwede mong papagawa dito sa category na to, use a manual to calculate an employee's vacation time. Apply law of statistics to evaluate the reliability of a written test. Ayan, diba? Sobrang daming pwede mong ipapagawa, guys, pag applying type of knowledge. Pinapasolve mo sila or ina-apply mo yung tinuro mo sa pinapa-apply mo sa kanila yung principle or topic na you discussed. We have here the keywords na pwede nating gamitin din sa applying level. The applies, changes, compute, construct, demonstrate. Ayun, from the word demonstrate, diba? Pinapakita, that's already application. Nagde-discover sila, minamanipulate nila. Yun, that's applying already. And operates, predict, mag-prepare, produces, relates, shows, solves. Ayun yan. But dito sa keywords, guys, hindi naman ibig sabihin niya yung specific keyword na yan ay para lang talaga sa remembering. There are instances or may mga pangyayari na ang halimbawa, yung define na word ay yung define na keyword ay pwede natin siyang gamitin dun sa understanding. Kasi, halimbawa, you have to define it on your own words, diba? It's more on comprehending the meaning dun sa nangyari. So, pwede siya dun sa understanding. Kaya, aside from the keyword na dapat tandaan nyo, dapat ma-identify nyo yung category itself. You have to master kung ano ba talaga yung ibig sabihin ng category na yan. Okay? Hindi lang doon sa keyword tayo magbe-base. And another example, sa analyzing naman to, mas malalim na. Kasi pag application, diba, it's just mere procedure. Pero pag analyzing, it separates materials or concepts into component parts so that its organizational structure may be understood. Distinguishes between facts and inferences. Okay guys, pag nag-a-analyze yung isang bata, it's more on separating materials. Sinaseparate mo yung mga facts na yon. And then, distinguish between facts and inferences. Pag-analyze ba, anong pinapagawa talaga sa mga bata? Example nito na situation na pwede natin ipagawa. Troubleshoot a piece of equipment by using logical deduction, recognize logical fallacies of reasoning, gathers information from a department, and select kayo ng required task for training. Imagine that one, nag-a-analyze yung isang bata, iniisip nila kung ano bang dapat na way. So, in that way, hinahati-hati nila into different parts. Yung kung saan ka mag-start mag-troubleshoot, or ito ba yung unang gagawin bago yung final, diba? Alam mo pagkasunod-sunod. And other examples ng keywords talaga pag-analyze, kasi it's separate pag-analyze. Ang examples nito is analyzes, breakdown, compare, contrast, diagrams, yung mga contrast, differentiates, discriminate, distinguishes, identifies, illustrate, tapos relate, select, separate. Yun yung pwede mong gamitin. Pero dito guys, sa identify, alam nyo, pwede din siyang magamit dun sa, sinabi ko kanina, sa first, which is remembering, diba? Halimbawa, identify the correct answer. Tapos yung lang naman, mag-provide ka ng definition, alamin lang nila yung right term, diba? So, it's more on knowledge. Pero ito, pag sa analyzing talaga, you are asking students to analyze something. May pinapagawa ka sa kanila na kailangan nilang pag-isipan ng mabuti. Hindi lang basta-bastang aalalahanin ng nila. And next is evaluating. Ito naman sa evaluating, guys, it's making judgment about the value of ideas or materials from the word itself, diba? Evaluate. Tinitingnan mo. Example na pwede mo ipagawa ng isang estudyante sa category na to select the most effective solutions, hire the most qualified candidate, explain and justify new budget. You know already yung evaluation, diba? Nag-evaluate kung karapat-dapat ba to, makakapasa ba to sa standard ko. yun yung evaluating. Pag pinapagawa mo yung mga bata na yun, mas nasa malalim ka na ng level of thinking. Mas nag-i-improve na. Alam mo yung may lumalalim na yung pinapagawa mo sa mga estudyante mo. After letting them analyze, ngayon mag-evaluate na sila. Diba, mag-analyze sila ng poem. I-analyze nila yun kung ano yung sinasabi ng author na yun. Tapos yung evaluate nila in a way na maganda ba? Sa tingin nyo ba, nagpa-follow siya ng certain rule? Yun. Alam mo yun, mas lalong nagde-develop yung thinking ng bata. Hindi lang siya mere na mag-iisip lang sila, mag-memorize lang sila. Kaya masasabi mo talaga ang isang exam ay standardized or ang isang education or yung lesson mo ay standardized pag palalim ng palalim yung pinapagawa mo sa mga estudyante mo wherein kailangan talaga nilang mag-isip. Kasi that's education. That's how are we going to provide a quality education. Kaya pag maging teacher na kayo, I hope that you will apply this in your lesson plans, even dun sa mga exams or quizzes natin na binibigay sa mga bata. Ang halimbawa nito sa keywords na evaluating naman, appraises, compares, criticizes, critique, mag-defend, or describes, discriminates. Ito yung sinasabi ko sa inyo kanina na may mga keywords din na pwedeng magamit dun sa kabila. Pero depende yun sa lalim ng pinapagawa mo sa mga estudyante, ha? And then, creating. It's building a structure or pattern from diverse elements. Put parts together to form a whole. Dito naman, kung ang analyzing or separating yung parts, pag creating naman, you are a structure of patterns form diverse, putting together into a whole. Pinagsama-sama mo yung lahat ng alam mo, iba pang isang bata, analyze mo na, or alam mo na yung tamang process or procedures. Now, ang pinaka-last part talaga sa cognitive is create. Kini-create nila or ginagamit nila yung nalalaman nila. Write a company operations or process manual. Design a machine to perform specific tasks, di ba? Yun na talaga yung pinaka-mabigat sa lahat. Kasi, they are able to practice it. Tapos, may application na ng knowledge, ginagamit pa nila yung alam niya, na evaluate nila kung tama ba yung ginagawa nila or na-analyze na nila. Andun yung pinaka-complete. Kaya yung creating talaga is yung pinaka-highest na form of knowledge na sa cognitive na pwede nating ipagawa sa mga estudyante natin. Kaya, commonly na ginagawa ngayon sa K-12, it's an outcome-based assessment. Kasi para makita talaga na may effect ba or nagagamit ng estudyante yung mga tinuturo natin sa kanila. And let's talk about affective domain. Tapos na tayo sa mind. Yun guys, sa mind yun. Kaya this is really best way to create a quality education talaga. Hindi lang sa mind yung tinitest natin. Kasi lahat ng tao may utak, 'di ba? But it doesn't mean na kung meron sila nito, sobrang talino na nila. We have to consider then yung other parts ng domain. We have the affective, yung sa feelings naman to, hindi lang sa brain ha. We're done with the brain, so let's start with the affective. Pag sinabing affective domain, this is according to Krathwohl Bloom noong 1973, it includes yung mga manner in which we deal with things emotionally. More on emotions, sa feelings, sa values, appreciation. Ito yung sinabi ko kanina. So, it has 5 categories naman, guys. Start with the simple to the greater one. Una, receiving the phenomena. Ano yung receiving phenomena na to? It's more on awareness, willingness to hear, tapos selected attention. Ang unang ipagawa mo is listen to others with respect. Listen for and remember the names of newly introduced people. Pwede mo siyang, halimbawa, sa activity mo sa mga estudyante, pag mga bata yun is more on greetings, yung lesson mo. Pwede ka mag-insert dun sa objective mo, dito sa affective domain, wherein students will be able to listen. Paano nila mapapractice na nakikinig talaga sila? They were able to remember ba yung name ng nagpakilala sa kanila? Or, pwede mo din ilagay dun sa sa objectives mo na at the end of the lesson, students will be able to listen to listen and consider to others' opinions. Lalo na pag ang topic mo is respecting other people's perception, di ba? Yun yung receiving phenomena sa affective domain. Pwede mo ituro sa bata. Yung keywords mo na pwede mo gamitin sa lesson plan or subjectives mo, we have the ask, chooses, describes, follows, gives, holds, identifies, locates, names, points to, selects. Diba? Ito yung sabi ko, yung sa verb, pwede siya dun sa knowledge. Pero, depende yun. Halimbawa, they will ask respectfully, ask carefully those people, more on affective, more on feelings yung nangingibabaw. Hindi siya sa memory. Ha? Dapat alam natin silang i-identify pag sa receiving, pag sa feelings yon. And then, pag responding naman to phenomena, this is the second category, it's the active participation on the part of the learners and attends and reacts to particular phenomena, and learning outcomes may emphasize compliance and responding and willingness to respond. Ang halimbawa dito, ang examples na pwede nating ipagawa sa bata is participate in class discussion. Lagi hindi na nawawala. Minsan, pag wala ka ng sa ibang teacher talaga, even me before, when I was still teaching elementary or high school na mga estudyante, minsan wala na akong maisip na lalo na pag yung topic ay halimbawa, yung topic is more on grammar lang naman. Tapos, paano kaya may insert yung values or affective domain dun sa mga bata? Ito yung favorite talaga na kasali dun sa objectives na nilalagay. Participate in class discussion. O, diba? That's already part of, affective domain. Kasi, ang maganda talaga, pag gagawa ka ng objectives mo dun sa lesson plan mo, merong cognitive, meron ding affective, tapos may psychomotor talaga. Kasi, it's a complete package na dun sa lesson mo, sa ginagawa mong presentation sa bata. Tapos, napaka-meaningful, tapos standardized talaga yung ginagawa mo na lesson plan or topic as a teacher. Kaya guys, I'm not really sinasabihan na dapat gawin nyo to. It's just for an example na minsan, pag wala tayong nakita na na pwedeng i-affective domain sa objectives mo, we could use participate in class discussion. Kasi it's still a values naman, 'di ba? Kung nagpa-participate yung bata, ibig sabihin nagre-respond siya. And you should be doing it. Dapat kung nag-participate in class discussion, dapat during discussion mo nagtatanong ka talaga sa mga bata, 'di ba? Para meron talagang values na nade-develop. Kasi you could not participate without listening, 'di ba? Or kung makipag-away ka sa mga kaklase mo dyan, it's still a affective domain. Halimbawa dito, answer, assist, aids, complies, conforms, discusses, and then labels, performs. So, sobrang daming pwede mong gamitin. Pero nasa sa inyo na yan kung anong specific na activity papagawa nyo. Ha? And, valuing. Ano naman yung valuing na to? Siyempre, mas malalim na to, bina-value na ng bata kung ano yung tinatutunan nila. It's the word or value a person attaches to a particular object, phenomenon, or behavior. This ranges from simple acceptance to the more complex state of commitment. Tapos, valuing is based on the internalizations of a set of specified values, while clues to these values are expressed in the learner's overt behavior and are often identifiable. Halimbawa dito, pwede natin ipagawa, demonstrate belief in the democratic process. 'Di ba? Kung nabavalue na talaga ng bata, ano yung pinahalagahan na niya? 'Di ba once you value such thing, it will be shown in your actions. Kaya dito, you are demonstrating the belief in the democratic process. Pinahalagahan na talaga ng bata, and it's a sensitive towards individual and cultural differences. Kung naging sensitive na sila sa halimbawa, not just demonstrating belief, pero pwede mo siyang ipakita through halimbawa sa ano bang pwedeng activities na nagde-demonstrate ka? Ayun, sa role play, 'di ba? Kung napa-demonstrate nila, that's a sign that students are you are letting them to value that type of idea. And other example of keywords, guys, sa valuing, completes, demonstrate, differentiates, explains, explain in a way, halimbawa, explain, hindi lang siya sa hindi lang siya dun sa unang way or hindi lang siya sa explaining and analyzing dun sa cognitive. Dito sa affective, nasa, nasa form siya ng valuing. Pag halimbawa, explain why is it important or why do we need to consider the feelings of other people? O kung tinuro mo sa mga bata na people have different perceptions, kaya dapat natin silang intindihin, they have different beliefs and culture. Alam mo yon, doon sa question na yon, ang sagot ng bata is more on valuing. Pinapahalagahan na ngayon yung idea or yung topic na pinapagawa mo. It's not just mere on the cognitive, na-explain lang, but it explaining in a way na may feelings dun sa bata. May values na dapat na result dun sa sagot na kailangan mo sa kanila. Tapos, we have the organization. Ito yung pinakamalalim na dun sa, sa affective talaga. Organization, I'm sorry, hindi pa pala yun. Meron pang I'm sorry, it's just repeating. Meron pang isa bago yung organization pala. Ang organization was, what is it? Pag sinabi nating organization, guys, it's the organizes values into priorities by contrasting different values, resolving conflict between them, and creating a unique value system. The emphasis is on comparing, relating, and synthesizing values. Kaya ito yung mas kasi organization Kung value kasi, there's a specific topic or behavior na ginagawa nila. Pero pag organization, values to, pinagsama-sama, more on, hindi lang isa yung focus niya. And halimbawa dito is recognizes the need for balance between freedom and responsible behavior. In this way, dalawang behavior or values yung kinoconsider mo, so dapat ma-organize nila. Dito I learned the value of freedom. Tapos yung responsible behavior mo, 'di ba? Alam mo yung pinagsama-sama, may organization of knowledge or yung feelings yung bata na dapat i-consider nila. Yung mga beliefs, mga interest ng ibang tao, that's already organization. Halimbawa is adhere, alters, arranges, combines, compares, complete, explain. Ayun, pwede natin siyang gamitin once we start or create objectives. Pero hindi sa lahat ng pagkakataon ay laging organization lang siya. Depende yun sa content kung ano ba talaga yung hinahanap mo or pinapagawa mo sa mga estudyante. And lastly, internalizing values. Grabe, no? Internalize, hindi lang bina-value, kasi bina-value, pwedeng ngayon lang i-value, diba? Pero susunod na mga araw, hindi na. Parang crush nyo. Hindi. Pero pag sa affective talaga na domain, ito yung pinaka malalim. It's internalizing characterization. Nasa buhay mo na. Yun yung internalizing. Has a value system that controls their behavior. Nakokontrol na yung behavior nila. The behavior is pervasive, consistent, predictable, and most importantly, characteristics of the learners. Instructional objectives are concerned with the student's general patterns of adjustment, personal, social, emotional. Mostly, guys, nangyayari siya, lalo na pag I know na may subject kayo na may subject kayo na understanding the self, or I'm not sure, sa ibang courses siguro. Halimbawa, sa understanding the self, ang more on sa pinag-aaralan ng mga, aside from theories, it's about you internalizing the values kung ano man yung tinuturo dun sa subject. If it's about respecting or loving yourself, hindi mo lang siya pinag-aaralan. There's an execution where i-internalize mo na siya. Sinasa puso mo na siya ng buong buo. Yun yung sa internalizing values. Kaya siya talaga yung pinaka mahalagang part sa affective domain pag nagtuturo tayo. Limbawa dito is nag-create sila ng life plan in an harmony with abilities. O 'di ba? Life plan. So ibig sabihin, You are teaching them to internalize it, not just for this moment, pero panghabang buhay nila na ano na pwedeng mangyari with abilities, interest nila, beliefs, tapos mag-prioritize sila ng time effectively to meet the needs of organization. Tapos uses an objective approach in problem solving. So kaya nilang anbawa sa kung tinuturo mo yung how to solve problems. Pag sa internalizing values, you are asking them or letting them to apply it for the lifetime. Alam mo yun, tatagal sa kanila yung nalalaman na yon. Laman na values na yun. Values peoples for what they are and not how they look. Kung pinag-aaralan nyo yung perception ng tao and how are you going to respect, of course, it should start within you. Now, the question is, how are you going to respect yourself until you die? Diba? Yung mga question na ganun, yung hinahayaan mo silang i-internalize yung values na gusto mong ituro na sa kanila. Not just for this moment na, dito sa roleplay na to, sa valuing, diba? Dun sa mababa lang kasi siya na mag-roleplay kayo, dapat ma-demonstrate nyo na nagre-respect kayo sa tao or alam nyo kung paano or magki-create kayo ng plano nyo. Pero dito sa internalizing, it's more on life plan. Panghabang buhay siya. Na pwedeng maka-affect dun sa pagkatao ng estudyante mo. We have here keywords: act, discriminates, displays, influences, listens, modifies, performs, proposes, qualifies, questions, revises, serves, solves, and also verify. So, bine-verify nila kung yung alam mo ba, yung thought mo ba ay tama. So, yun yung mga question na pwede nating ilagay doon sa internalizing values. O, di ba guys, maganda talaga na ito yung kagandahan talaga na pinag-aaralan natin yung different category. Kasi we're not just merely saying na dapat yung knowledge is more sa cognitive. Dapat alam nila, ma-memorize. Hindi lang ganun yung testing the intelligence of a person, ha? You have to, kaya dapat alam natin to. Kung may standard ba talaga yung pinapagawa mo sa bata or kung effective pa talaga yung ginawa mong exam. Kasi kung easy peasy, 'di ba? Do you think you could help the students kahit na perfect siya? Tapos more on memorizing lang pala yung pinagawa mo sa mga bata, 'di ba? It's so sad to know that if we are creating something na hindi tayo nag-follow ng standard kasi there's no quality education at all. Or saan yung quality of education dun, 'di ba? Kung ganun lang yung pinapagawa natin sa mga estudyante. And now, let's talk about the psychomotor domain naman. Pag sa psychomotor domain, according to Bloom, it includes physical movement, psychomotor, physical, diba? We are done with the mental, the feelings, the heart. Now, let's more on the body. Physical movement, mga coordination, and use of the motor skill areas. Minsan mahirap din to gawin talaga pag gagawa ka ng lesson plan. Easy lang sa knowledge sa cognitive. Kasi identify, determine, alam mo yon kasi you're just discussing a topic. Pero pag sa psychomotor, you are letting a student do something na na-execute nila. May procedure ka na pinapagawa. The 7 major categories are listed from the simple behavior ulit to the most complex. And the Dave's psychomotor domain is simplest and generally easiest to apply in the corporate development environment. Both models offer different emotional perspective and advantages. Check the relevance and importance of each before you implement. So, nasa atin to kung anong i-apply natin or gagamitin mo. Kasi lahat naman talaga, you have to consider yung mga estudyante mo. Hindi ibig sabihin na tama palagi yung pinapagawa natin. We have here the Simpson psychomotor domain. Ang una niya talaga sa psychomotor is perception. It's awareness, the ability to use sensory cues to guide motor activity. This ranges from sensory stimulation through cue selection to translation. Ito yung mga example, guys, na pwede natin kung saan gumagalaw yung estudyante natin na hindi lang nakaupo. Detects non-verbal communication cues, and then estimate where a ball would land after it's thrown, and then moving to the correct location to catch the ball, adjust heat of stove to correct temperature by smell and taste of food. Adjust the height of the fork on a forklift by comparing whether the forks are in relation to the pallet. So, ito naman, more on actions talaga pag sa psychomotor. Ito yung mga pwede mong verbs na pwedeng nagamitin. Chooses, describes, detects, differentiates, distinguishes, identify, isolate, relates, select. Tingnan nyo ha, describes. Halimbawa, ang pwedeng i-describes na wherein gumagalaw yung bata or magde-detect, ito kasi more on more on psychomotor talaga. Pero yung describe kasi pwede siya sa cognitive, pwede din sa affective, 'di ba? Pero sa psychomotor naman, paano siya nagiging describe? Halimbawa, ano ba pwede ipagawa sa bata? You are teaching them how to identify yung texture. Diba? Kung texture yung tinuturo mo sa bata, if it's rough or smooth. So, pag de-describe nila, halimbawa, you are asking them, may pa-activity ka kung saan gumagalaw yung bata. Halimbawa, I'll give you an example. Halimbawa, ito. It is a color pen. Tapos, naka-blindfold yung bata. Yun yung activity. Sobrang dami talaga na activities, guys, na pwede natin pagawa sa bata. Na dito sa psychomotor, wherein gumagalaw sila. Hindi lang sila merely nakaupo or nakikinig lang. Dapat din may ginagawa sila. Kasi may ibang bata na they learn more once they do something. Alam mo yung mas natututo sila pag ginagawa nila. Halimbawa, sa texture, naka-blindfold sila and then describe something na nahawakan nila or describe, it's smooth, tapos ganyan, alam mo yun, there's a part na, na hard yung texture niya, or whatsoever, diba? So, yun yung pwede mong example sa psychomotor. Basta tandaan natin, pag psychomotor, you are letting them do something. Gumagalaw sila. There's a motor skill areas na nangyayari sa mga estudyante mo. Tapos, another, sa set, readiness to act. So, ready ba sila? It includes mental, physical, and emotional sets. These three sets are dispositions that predetermine a person's response to different situations, sometimes called mindsets, kung ano yung nasa mindset ng bata. Ang pwede mong ipagawa dito, knows and act upon a sequence of steps in a manufacturing process, recognize one's abilities and limitations, shows desire to learn a new process, motivation. Kaya mas malalim siya kasi readiness to act. Kung nandun ba talaga yung confidence ng bata, makikita ba doon na, yan, ginagawa ba talaga nila yung dapat mong ipagawa? Yung procedure ba sinusunod? Yun yung sa readiness to act. Pwede mo silang keyword na paggagawa ka ng objectives, begin, display, explains, moves, proceeds, react, shows, states, volunteers. O, diba? Andun din yung explain ulit. Paano nagiging part ng psychomotor yung explain. So, there are lots of things. Pwede mo silang, other examples, guys, na na-observe ko dati during ng mga observation ng mga klase. I hope na ma-experience nyo din yan in the future na yung field study para makita nyo talaga yung reality na nangyayari sa classroom. Pwede siyang psychomotor sa explanation. May isang teacher, sobrang galing ng resource teacher ko dati. Ang tinuturo niya ay synonym tsaka antonym. Synonym tsaka antonyms. Ang pinapagawa niya, tinago niya yung mga words or yung may mga sa classroom, may tinago siyang mga words na mga yung mga bond paper. Tapos nakasulat doon yung beautiful, ugly, or pretty, or meron ding basta pinaghalo na yung mga words, tinago lang niya sa classroom. Ang first na pinagawa niya sa mga bata is hanapin. You have to look for the psychomotor yung pinagawa niyang activity na yun kasi execution, tapos may movement ng students. Pinahanap niya sa mga estudyante, dapat nagkakaroon sila bawat isa ng bond paper na yun na may nakasulat na word. Tapos, after they look for it, is they have to search. They have to search kung sino yung kapartner nila na synonym or antonym na yan. But they start with synonym muna. Tapos yung synonym na yon, so yung mga bata sobrang excited, yung estudyante, alam mo, nandun yung eagerness nila, readiness nila to act. Sobrang dami ng pwedeng objectives doon. Psychomotor, it's a complete package. Yung activity na yun, ha, I'm sure marami pang examples, but that's the best example na pwede kong mabigay. Ang ginawa, yung mga bata, nagkikita-kita sila, or, ayun, ito, partner ko si ano, ganyan-ganyan. And then, yung explanation doon, it's a psychomotor, kasi, yung bata, they stand in front, tapos nag-explain sila, bakit pareho kami? Kasi po, synonym kasi po, pag sinabing pretty or beautiful, same lang. They explain it, di ba? Alam mo yung ginagawa nila, yung thing na yan, bago explain. So, that's, yung sinasabing psychomotor, hindi lang siya sa mind. Merong, explanation kasi ginagawa nila. Or, merong brainstorming, not just one student, but the other students din. Nagkakaroon ng teamwork. And then next, guys, na category is guided response. Ano naman tong guided response na to? It's the early stages in learning a complex skill that includes limitations and trials and error. And adequacy of performance is achieved by practicing. From the word practicing, that's already a guided response. Ang halimbawa dito is perform a mathematical equation. As demonstrated, follows instruction to build a model. Tapos, nagre-respond sila ng hand signal of instructor while learning to operate a forklift. Ayun, pag guided response, from the word guide, diba? So, meron silang tinitingnan or they're looking or following on something. Bawa, dito sa mathematical equation, yun yung serve them as a guide or yung instructor na yun kung anong gagawin. Okay? Dali lang naman to sa guided response. Ang pwede mong ipagawa is copy, traces, follows. Kasi yung trace, di ba, may sinusunod ka din. Tapos follow, may sinusunod. React, reproduce, respond. Ang dami, di ba? Ang daming mga keywords or verbs. Pero pag kaya meron dapat tayong copy na to ng Bloom's and we should understand it. Kasi pag gagawa ka na ng sarili mong objectives, malalaman nyo yan. So, ipapagawa ko yan sa inyo. Hindi lahat ng verbs doon ay kailangan mo, not just because trace yung nakalagay dyan, ay simple lang yung objectives na gagawin mo. If it's a guided response, dapat lalabas talaga doon sa complete na pinapagawa mo sa bata na it's more on a guided. Meron talaga silang sinusundan. Okay? Tapos, sa mechanism naman, a basic proficiency. This is the intermediate stage in learning complex skills. Learned responses have become habitual and the movements can be performed with some confidence and proficiency. Halimbawa is, kasi mechanism, basic na to mechanically na to, they're doing it. Use a personal computer, tapos mag-repair leaking faucet and drive a car. Yun, basic. Mas malalim na siya kasi ginagawa na, pinapractice dapat, hindi lang something na simple lang, but it's an intermediate na stage of learning. Complex na yung skills na tinuturo mo sa mga bata. And it assembles, calibrates, constructs, displays, fastens, heats, manipulates, sketches, diba? Napapansin yung sketches dito sa guided response, pinapatrace mo lang sila una, tapos bandang pinapano mo na sila, they are sketching na, diba? Ito yung laging inuulit ko talaga sa inyo guys for this subject na assessment of learning. Di tayo pwedeng didiretso sa pinakamahirap. Tingnan mo, even those educators before, sila Blooms na mga talaga, pinag-aralan talaga halos lahat ng ginagawa nila or mga assessment nila and it's standardized. Pinag-aralan na kung tama ba or hindi. Diba? Sumusunod sila. It should be from simple hanggang sa abstract. Sa palalim ng palalim yung tinuturo mo sa mga estudyante mo. Huwag tayong agad-agad magbibigay ng mahirap na activities kung hindi naman natin sila na-guide or hindi natin na-provide yung mga lower levels of thinking para mas ma-master talaga nila, di ba? Kasi we have to master first the basics bago tayo magkaroon talaga ng expertise, di ba? Bago tayo mag-expert sa isang bagay, master the basics first, okay? And Okay, that's all guys about the educational objectives. Sana maintindihan nyo na sa pag-create ng educational objectives or paggagawa na kayo ng lesson plans nyo, which is papagawa o talaga. Alamin nyo kung yung dinesign nyo ba na gusto nyong mangyari sa after ng lesson nyo, kung anong gusto matutunan, ay makonsider natin yung lalim or yung kahalagahan from starting to basic hanggang sa mahirap na topic. But it doesn't mean na kailangan simple or basic lang lagi ipapagawa sa mga bata. Because we are facilitators of learners, we facilitate them to make things easier or to make learning more easier for them. Okay? And guys, for this activity, next week nyo na ipasa to or after na ng exam, you have to create your own learning objectives and outcomes. Ayun, higher order thinking na to. Kasi na-discuss ko na din naman dun sa subject din natin at sa assessment, pero dun din sa curriculum na anong dapat gawin in creating an objective. So, choose 3 lessons or topics that you wanted to teach. Kung gusto mo ba, topics mo, verbs, nouns, I know, you have lots of information na din yan. May mga background na din kayo ng mga topic. Tapos, you have to write 3 objectives. Bawat topic dapat merong cognitive, may affective, and psychomotor. And you have the objectives na ibigay na din dyan na pwede nyong gamitin. Basta just make sure na you have to be very careful in using the objectives. Basta ang tandaan nyo lang is ma-identify nyo kung ano ba talaga yung meaning ng pinapagawa nyo sa mga estudyante. Here are the references, guys, of my discussion. You have it also in your module. Pwede din ninyong i-check yan if you wanted to understand more or meron kayong nalilito ka sa isang part na yan. But you can also ask some questions sa GC natin or dito sa comment nyo lang. Thank you so much, guys. I hope you have a great day.